Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredibly complex crises facing Pakistan. We're talking about a nation of nearly 260 million people that is right now at a massive historical crossroads.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the political turmoil that really set the stage for everything else. Then we'll look at the economic fallout, a scary surge in violence, and of course, the impact this all has on everyday people. And finally, we'll ask, what could possibly come next? All right, let's get into it.
To really get a handle on what's happening in Pakistan today, you have to realize this isn't just one single problem. It's several massive crises all hitting at the very same time.
In fact, you see this phrase, a historical inflection point, pop up again and again from analysts. What they mean is that years of political instability, a deep reliance on foreign loans, and a really volatile security situation have all basically boiled over, creating this moment that's unlike anything the country has seen in a long, long time.
Okay, so how did this storm even start to form? Well, the first big pillar, and you could argue it's the most important one, is a deep political crisis that has completely fractured the country's leadership and honestly has just shattered public trust in its most important institutions. This timeline really maps out 2 straight years of just intense turmoil. It kicks off with something historic, the ousting of Prime Minister Imran Khan. He was the first prime minister in Pakistan's entire history to be removed from office by a no-confidence vote. From that moment to his imprisonment, to the incredibly controversial elections in 2024, every single step has just driven the country further apart, leaving this very fragile coalition government trying to find its footing. And right at the heart of all this political drama is this powerful, unelected force known simply as the establishment. Now, there are widespread accusations that the military meddled big time in the 2024 elections, all to keep Imran Khan's extremely popular party from getting back into power. That move seems to have broken an already strained relationship between the military and the people, and it's fueling some really deep resentment. And of course, this kind of political chaos, it doesn't just stay in the political world. It spills over, and fast, having absolutely devastating consequences for the economy and pushing it right to the edge of a total collapse. If you look back at mid-2023, the country was staring down one of its worst economic disasters since it became independent in 1947. It was about to default on its debt, its foreign cash reserves were so low they could barely cover 3 weeks of imports, and inflation was just out of control. Now, things have stabilized a bit, but it's a very, very fragile recovery, and it's built on some really painful budget cuts. Just look at this number, 38%. That isn't just a statistic on a chart. For millions of people, it was a crippling crisis. It meant the price of absolute essentials. We're talking food, fuel, cooking gas. It all shot up to levels people just couldn't afford. It made daily survival a real struggle. And as if all that political and economic mess wasn't enough, a climate disaster of just epic proportions hit. The 2022 floods literally submerged a third of the country. It wiped out roads, bridges, and farms, dealing a $30 billion blow to an economy that was already on its knees. So, to avoid total collapse, Pakistan had to go to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. It got a multi-billion-dollar bailout, but that money came with some really tough strings attached, like getting rid of subsidies on fuel and electricity, which makes life even harder for regular people. And at the same time, the military actually stepped in, helping create this new council to try and bring in foreign money and get the economy back on track.
So, you've got this dangerous mix of political chaos and economic desperation. And what happens when you have that? You create a power vacuum. And militant and separatist groups, well, they have been all too happy to jump in and exploit it, leading to a massive surge in violence.
The data here is pretty stark. 2024 was one of the most violent years Pakistan has seen in more than a decade. Just look at that jump in violent attacks. It tells a really worrying story, that armed groups are getting stronger and are spreading out across the country.
And this chart, wow, it shows you exactly where the trouble is concentrated. A whopping 85% of all attacks happen in just 2 provinces right on the borders with Afghanistan and Iran. This isn't random. This is where very specific militant groups are fighting their own violent campaigns.
So it's crucial to understand, this isn't just one fight against one enemy. It's happening on multiple fronts. You've got the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP, using safe spots in Afghanistan to launch attacks. Then you have Baloch separatist groups who want control over their province's natural resources, and they're targeting Chinese-funded projects.
And on top of that, you have the Islamic states and other militias stirring up brutal violence between different Muslim sects. So we've talked politics, we've talked economics, we've talked security. But beyond all those headlines, this perfect storm has a real, profound, and painful human cost for the nearly 260 million people who live there. The economic crisis alone has just been devastating. The World Bank figured that about 4 million people were pushed into poverty. And that's not just a number. That's jeopardizing their basic rights to have enough food, to be healthy, and to have a decent life, all while the government was cutting back on help for the poor to meet those bailout conditions. And at the very same time, basic human rights are under enormous pressure. Press freedom? The country's ranking has tanked. The government is using these vague anti-disinformation laws to go after journalists and activists. Religious minorities are facing intense persecution, and just awful violence against women continues to be this huge, unaddressed crisis.
And listen to this, from Human Rights Watch. It really highlights a grim reality. For women and girls, systemic violence, things like acid attacks, forced marriage, so-called honor killings, it's a devastating and daily threat. And there's been very little meaningful action from the government to protect them.
So, with all three of these huge problems, the political, the economic, and the security crises, all feeding each other in this vicious cycle, what on earth is the path forward for Pakistan?
Which brings us right back to that central idea, a perfect storm. The political deadlock makes it impossible for the government to create a solid, long-term economic plan. That economic hardship then creates the perfect recruiting ground for militant groups who prey on poor and hopeless communities, and that, in turn, makes the country even more unstable. You see the cycle, right?
Right now, the government's response is to stick with the IMF reforms and launch new military operations against the militants. But, a lot of people see these as just short-term fixes. They're like band-aids on these deep structural wounds, like the military's oversized role in politics, or the fact that the rich often don't pay taxes.
Ultimately, Pakistan's future really depends on whether it can do what has proven so incredibly difficult in its past: fix its broken politics, build an economy that can stand on its own 2 feet, and create a lasting peace for its people. And that leaves us with a huge, uncertain question for the years ahead, not just for Pakistan, but for the stability of the entire region.